Good morning. And honestly, this is my first visit in Bangalore. And I was just telling my friends that I'm put straight on a pedestal, for a first timer in the city. So I think I'm nervous, of course, but also I'm very happy to meet old friends and new friends, work partners, co-activists. So I think in another few minutes, I'll be extremely comfortable. Bear with me if I am, not living up to what it was promised, but I'll try my best. Charisma, like Charisma said, the conversation goes back 1 year back when there was a creative plan to do something, a creative project together with T-Boy Films and us. It couldn't happen, it couldn't take place precisely because of the fear, perceived fear, also real fear, and perceived uncertainty, also real uncertainty that Manipur has become, especially in the last 2 years, but also for decades, So let me try and unpack some of these mysteries and myths and misinformation, and also real stories which do not get documented or which do not get talked about. This has run 100 times in my head, ever since I signed up for this talk a couple of weeks back. So I was thinking, why am I even here in the first place? Why am I in this platform in the first place? So in my years of activism and community work, especially starting from Delhi way back in 2018-19, and then taking it back to Manipur, where I come from, where I grew up with, and finally again also stepping out of my own hometown, my own region, and also trying to connect, trying to impact, trying to support, community folks, people in need of support beyond Manipur today. So it's been a long sort of detour journey from Delhi to Manipur, and then finally out of Manipur. We are now engaging with, community folks, people from the region, in Bangalore, in Delhi, in Kolkata, in Guwahati, because at the end of the day, we realize as activists, mostly, and, people in the community work, sector is that we don't really do it alone, we do it together. One of the justifications, one of the reasons that I'm here today is that the work, both at Matai Society and my own engagement with communities have really sort of expanded beyond Manipur, and I thought it's a great opportunity to speak to the people here, to share some of the stories, and to also share the struggles, so that maybe tomorrow we get to be friends and we invite each other over dinner or tea, or we get to work together, we get to support together, we get to save a life together. So having said of all this, I did lay out some specific points so that we also do justify what we intend to talk here about crossroads, about home, about where I come from, about migration. So I think I really want to start with having to talk about migration. There has been, cities after all is also a consequence, good or bad, of migration, from all walks of life. So likewise, North India in general, or Manipur in particular, the migration pattern has been there for decades, for many, many, many years. And Bangalore being one of those cities, Delhi being one of those cities where communities from smaller states, from corners of the country have come in search of livelihood or otherwise in search of a life that they look forward to. Understanding from my own lived experiences in Delhi particularly, but also parts of Kolkata and Guwahati and other cities, and also a lot of friends who have today adopted, the city as their home, or perhaps second home, or are in the process of coming into terms with the city. What we have also realized is that we are often called as Chinese. As young graduates, as young people, when we stepped out of our homes for the first time, India did feel like really strange and difficult. And I stayed India to be able to tell what I mean, not otherwise. So it did feel strange, it did feel painful to keep continuing to explain where you come from over and over again as students and professionals, young people who are really out of that corner of the world for the first time, where the trains do not reach yet. There is only an airport, you can, navigate with. So it's really a geographically, culturally, socially, linguistically quite disconnected from the rest of the country, including in the syllabus that we studied in school and colleges. It's a very disconnected, invisible, entity that I think the rest of the country still struggles to grapple with, or maybe not yet. So I think our entry into the cities were marked by that, slightly, let's say, racial, cultural, linguistic, let's say, ghettoization or mark. And it is unfortunate for a lot of people, whose first entry into the mainstream Indian city is to be sort of racially sort of identified, distinctly put within a certain ghetto or circle. And therefore, I think a lot of our experience in the last 20 years, 30 years still continue to be sort of undoing that, pain, undoing that, struggle, coming into terms with that identity, which we only realize that we are so different when we are here. And having said that, Northeast India in itself, within its own region, has a bit of this migration pattern within the region itself. And it is not a unique experience that people come to the city and experience that racial profiling or discrimination. It happens within the region as well. I mean, it's not a one standalone incident. So therefore, I think what we experience here, what we experience within the region, have their own similarities, have their own differences as well. The only difference probably is that there is still a largely affinity in terms of language and food and culture within the region itself. There is also indeed a lot of diversity. Of course, it's not an homogeneous entity. However, in the larger mainstream Indian cities, I think the differences is too distinct, and that takes up a lot of our time, years, and emotions to grapple with that. And having said that, the migration patterns seem to also have been changing, especially because of the ever-polarizing armed conflict in various parts of the country. Here I am to speak about Manipur, and if I were to, give references, there has been, Bodoland crisis in Chhattisgarh. There is fight for homeland everywhere in every part of the country. I mean, it's a very difficult country, to be honest. Manipur is not the first to have gone through this ethnic polarization, violence close to genocide, mass displacement. So 60,000 people were displaced overnight in May 2023. We were shocked. None of us were prepared for what was going to come. So communities, groups, organizations like us, like Matai Society, which is largely a queer, trans, women-led organization, had to, unfortunately, respond to the conflict by opening up relief camps, by starting relief activities, by sourcing in, funds and resources to provide shelter and, immediate support to the people in crisis. And over 2 years, we have been able to fortunately work with a lot of groups, which I could briefly also mention. There are even Bangalore groups as well. So we work with a lot of artists, we work with a lot of groups at the local level. But I would like to mention, there is the Snehadhara Foundation, with which we have been doing psychosocial support work. Snehadhara is Bangalore based. We have been also fortunate to work with Aya Sangat. Aya Sangat is mostly based in Bhopal. However, Joshua lives in Bangalore, so there is that Bangalore connection. So likewise, we have been privileged enough to have had the support of many like-minded groups, activists and artists. And today we have designed, in fact, community intervention projects. For example, we run psychosocial support interventions in the form of listening circles, suicide prevention helpline. We're just starting shortly. We also have livelihood initiative, one of which in the last minute we decided to showcase a little bit there. So that's a handloom work coming from weavers and tailors who are today displaced by the conflict. Why would a women, queer, trans-led organization who vouched to fight for gender rights, who vouched for advocacy works, had to take up relief work as a response to the conflict, is largely also because of the very lack of proactive response from the system, and therefore public and communities had to take up the responsibility to help people. So this, I think, show a lot about how the systematic response to public crisis is probably very problematic. I was also thinking about then therefore the recent trend in migration patterns. A lot of people lost homes, and a lot of them, 60,000 people, a lot of them are in relief camps right now. A lot of them are in spaces they can afford in the state, within the state. A lot of them also move out, and they are today struggling to settle in Delhi, Bangalore, Kolkata. Especially young boys and young girls taking up jobs which are not secured, getting into spaces and works which often come with a lot of violence. There is a lot of violence within it. Young boys have picked up guns, so many of them. Young people have been killed, have been killed on and off in the crossfires. Young girls in the city struggling to get a livelihood, attempting to get a job here, send money back home for their aged parents. Also, young people here who might not have otherwise been able to talk to each other within the state because of the polarization. Here, I could also see them, have tea or coffee together. So I just came back from Delhi, and there was that tension between different communities, Kuki, Jo, Meitei communities in Delhi, but also we were able to say hi to each other. I'm not very familiar with Bangalore in that sense, but I have been speaking to friends here and trying to understand what's the landscape of the city, what's the cultural, linguistic, racial diversity, how do people talk to each other, interact with each other. I've been able to identify some existing groups. In fact, this space is one of the spaces that I was able to discover in the process some time back. I also discovered queer spaces, facilitated by friends here. In fact, today after this session, there are 2 more community events run by community friends here. So as I was stepping out of my friend's house at the Yelahanka today, I was looking at the greenery of the city, which still I think is visible to some extent, unlike many other cities. So I was looking at the greenery, I was looking at the golf course. What a peaceful, normal life it looks like. Something that I think a lot of us who come from Manipur or Nagaland or Mizoram or Assam probably haven't seen something like that, not just in the last 2 years, but for decades. I think we are people who still live with intergenerational trauma. We are people who still carry that both real fear and perceived fear. Every time there is a tire puncture, I think we're still shaken up. It's within us. And one of the things of coming to the city and exploring these spaces as well was not just to get a livelihood, but was to actually imagine a life which is more peaceful, was to imagine a life which is less traumatic, become home if that is possible, if the city is welcoming enough, if the city is respectful and inclusive of diverse folks coming from different walks of life. I'm yet to see Bangalore a little more. I'm also thinking of friends and folks who really work late into the nights, night shifts. I know a lot of folks who do work in the night, young girls who work in the hospitality sector because that's the only livelihood that they're capable or that they found for themselves. And I try to think of the struggle that they have to go through in a city like this where your housing, your job, your social life is not secured, but you have to navigate through that. So I would like to echo some of the struggles that they have to live through here. And if there is anyone who in the audience is willing to talk about that struggle, not just folks from Manipur, but people who have migrated here, people who have had the struggle of trying to navigate the city, trying to find a new home here, trying to find friends here. It would be incredibly enriching for me to also take back some of it and go back and tell my friends that, hey, this is also the story of Bangalore and it could be you tomorrow, that it's not that bad. People are welcoming there. People are happy to have us there. If there is any story like that, it would be really lovely to take back. I'm very happy to interact with people, learn what I can learn from you, and I can also, in fact, share more if I can share and, help you understand us a little more. Thank you so much.
You mentioned in the beginning about the perceptions and the truths and the fallacies and the imaginations. Could you expand on that? I know it's a very complex landscape, but just take one tiny sliver of it and see how we can understand it better.
I could take the help of a friend to do that. There is a lot of real fear about a place like Manipur, but there's also perceived fear. And I don't know if it is going to make sense, but Joshua, if you can help me. So Joshua is from Ayah Sangat Bhopal. Joshua and we have been working together on a mental health, informed livelihood skill building work in Manipur currently. So when Joshua and Aya Sangat were to visit Manipur for mental health workshops in Manipur, I think there were apprehensions, especially for Aya Sangat to send Joshua to Manipur. And I think there was a lot of perceived uncertainty and fear. But Joshua, when you actually came there, I'm sure some of it also were broken down, and you came face to face with it. So if you can just help me with that, I think it would be better.
So I think what you prepared me for was different from maybe a little bit of what I experienced. So I think you did share with me the very real dangers of maybe like the conflict and what's been going on, and also assured me about like a lot of other things as well. But from my experience, like something as simple as maybe going out in the night. I was warned not by just my colleagues, but also by the people in the place I was staying at to not maybe leave the place after night, about being mindful of safety. I think also just about like there were certain people who at times showed up in ways that may not have been super in with great intentions at establishments to kind of ask for some kind of support. I'm just being vague here. So I think there were some real like precautions I noticed that the communities were taking to kind of safeguard themselves, closing businesses earlier in the evening, and maybe, all of that. But apart from that, the community is still thriving. There's, people are still living their lives, going about things, I think being very, like, even as last week, we were in one of the rooms, like, for a workshop, and then a metal door banged really loudly. And everyone in the room jumped, and someone was like, one of our team members were like, okay, for a second, I thought it was something else. So there's a lot of remnants and also like ongoing, I guess, concerns, but the community still thrives. It still goes on. They still support each other. The markets are open. We met some wonderful people all across, I think, the town and the city. And I don't know if that answers the question.
That answers the question, all right.
It does answer the question, but many of us have our own experiences from conflict zones where it is the abnormal for us. Mainlanders who go to a conflict zone, you tolerate it for 2 weeks and come back and no harm. But for you, it's the exact reverse. Like you were giving the example of looking at a golf course and just imagining how peace looks and feels like. Is a thought that would never occur to a mainlander. Right? So the things that we take completely for granted, I don't just mean physical security, it could be the little things or the big things. And how does that change? Because you move between the two spaces, you'll be able to perceive that better.
It usually is a very deeper process. So every time I get out of my town to be in Delhi, mostly, or in Kolkata, it takes a bit to settle down in the city. My body and my system is not used to that kind of, normal, peaceful living. And it takes a while to get used to it. And it's also painful for me often that this exists out there as it should exist. And this is something that we haven't seen for, like I said, decades. It just got worse in the last 2 years. So more than my conscious mind, but I think the system within me, the subconscious, the unconscious, do not just register it. The subconscious and the unconscious register the sound of a metal door banging, the tire puncture as a bomb, as a gun firing. So I think that's how the system, my inner system, have registered itself. So that's just how it is. And even if I'm in the city, going out shopping or, going out at a cafe or restaurant or taking a walk, it's definitely peaceful. I can feel it. But I think the system within probably finds it contradictory. So it usually takes a lot of time to really sort of fill the place as other people's probably feel. So I think one small example would be how traumatized subjects, how traumatized people do not just register what's around us. They register as they resisted back then. So I think it's a bit like that. PTSD, just to be sort of saying it bluntly. Yeah, something like that. It doesn't just register. It feels strange. It feels strange here as well, sitting here. It's a mix of emotions. I don't think there's one emotion. There is anger, there is just a lot of furiousness that why isn't this for us? Also, a little hopelessness that, oh, that's how it is, it's not gonna change. It's just a lot of emotions, yeah. So anger is one of them. I think there's just a lot more, yeah. And I think a little bit of yearning and longing also that this could be our home also, right? So yeah, that's this emotional process come and go. It stays, yeah, it stays.
So you did mention about a major issue being the inability of the system to respond, right? And that is a very systemic problem. That is, we are facing in very larger issues like the one that you spoke about, but even very smaller issues in different parts of the country where the system is not responding, and therefore that vacuum is getting filled in by civil society actors, by NGOs, by people like yourselves who are trying to do something, and that's more a reaction to get some sort of normalcy back. So could you expand a little bit more, if at all there is a move towards how does one start to make a correction there, and is that even a possibility?
Prime Minister of the country has not visited Manipur in the last 2 years. However loud or angry we shout, it's difficult to wake up somebody who's not sleeping. Yeah, I mean, I like to respond that way. But on the other way, this relentless effort to ask for accountability through media, through petitions, through public rallies, through editorials, I think that is tremendously important. But as we also know that those kind of spaces have been also co-opted mostly. We're not saying that it's hopeless. But we're really, our hands are really tight, I feel, especially coming from that side of the country. We feel that our hands are really tight, however hard we scream or shout. And especially women have been also at the forefront of public protests. But I think the system has also been able to dilute that movement as well, because it's so powerful. It's potentially very disruptive as well. But the system has been able to sort of dilute that as well. So I think every aspect of public voice, public asking for accountability, I think have been compromised, including the digital platforms where misinformation and propaganda is so smart than we were ever prepared for. That's how I feel. But sitting in spaces like this also, I think, is the silver lining often, that there are still group of people who can throw a stone in the ocean, that even if it doesn't produce a wave, it still has a ripple effect. That's what we are counting on right now, not just in the country, but I think globally, especially with the way the right has sort of empowered itself, sort of strangulating every other voices and spaces. So yeah, I think I'm looking at the, like a stone being dropped at the ocean, not the waves currently.
I was just curious, was this whole thing deep-lying discontent which came to fore in 2023, or this is a political creation? Because that's something as a Bangalorean I never figured out. I mean, is this something which was fomented, or was it already deep-lying which just needed a small trigger? Or
I mean, it's very hard to answer that question, to be honest. I wish we have a social scientist to actually throw more light on that. I can only speak as a young person who's been able to, do community work, do some introspection. So I can only answer as somebody like that. And in my understanding, what we are witnessing today in Manipur, I think is both in the making for a long time, right from the time when the tribals were converted into Christianity, right from when the indigenous communities were converted into Hindus, right from the ways in which the British drew boundaries without having to understand, consult anything about the communities and the histories and the landscape, right from the treaties that were signed between India and Burma, giving away a large part of the Kabo Valley, which was earlier part of Manipur. Also, the way in which the Indian nation drew boundaries in 1947, pretty much at the discontent of people, and erstwhile kingdoms and, states, independent states. Also, following independence, the Nehruvian, the Gandhi. sort of very aggressive attempt at unifying the nation, including bombing Mizoram, the first of its kind aerial bombing within its own country. The resistance movement that came afterwards or around that time, with a lot of, let's say, alleged interest from China as well, in the region. A lot of young people educated enough to understand who they are and to ask for self-determination, and yet self-determination always been just a dream, always been anti-national, in the country. Economic stagnation, poverty, multi-dimensional poverty, cross-border politics. It's pretty much a porous border between Myanmar, Bangladesh, and the northeastern region. All this put together, and including especially the kind of ethnic polarization in the last decade or so, not just here across the subcontinent, globally the rise of the far right, and also a very resurgence of religious, radicals, sentiments. So I think it's all of this. Also, I think there is deep within a very corporate, hunger for more land, more resources, more natural resources, which we have in abundance. Rising population and lack of, land and resources to survive. I think it's all of this, in my understanding.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you for speaking to us about something that would create a natural response of rage, but taking the time to talk about your experiences. But something you said about leaving your home, trying to create something and survive, reminded me of something I read recently, which is the purpose of life of an Indian is to escape India. It can either be done by leaving India physically, or figuratively by shifting to a gated community or another city, because because once you leave that India that we're escaping, suddenly India becomes nice. And there is this notion that we're constantly in a state of trying to leave the India that we are in and go somewhere else to create a life where we are given what we are promised as the vision of being an Indian, right? The mythos that is told to us in media about development, economic, growth and stability, but constantly being in that state of escaping or surviving or running away or having to leave to give back, to where we come from. Oftentimes I've seen that a lot of community building that happens in that kind of tense state, it can become unhealthy, right? Like, in the sense, a lot of community building today in minority groups has been centered around consumption, right? Like selling, buying, meeting in a way that portrays that we are living the India that we were promised, as opposed to what we are actually living in. So I wanted to kind of hear more from you about, have you, in your work with advocacy and community building, been able to create ways in which we don't have to depend on these, the established status quo of having to be able to do a lot of consumption, having to spend more to be more with your people, and also spending not just in terms monetarily, but also emotionally, right? There is this constant cycle of offering your pain and receiving it, and then again and again, till like the thought registers into someone's head that we're not constantly, trying to escape what we are suffering from.
I could speak from an experience of living in a small town, because I think it's quite different from the experience of living in a city. So where I come from, it's a very small town, and we mostly don't have much money. There is about 52% unemployment in the state. The 48 employment ratio is mostly in the capital city, which is Imphal in this case, and I come from a different district in a smaller town. So therefore, where I come from in that district and beyond Imphal, what you're looking at is a sort of rural, remote, Manipur. It's only Imphal that gives you a picture of a slightly urban space. Beyond that, it's not. Like 10 kilometers away from the airport, which is in Imphal. It's just remote area mostly. So therefore, we don't have a lot of money out there. It's sort of, we are a society which is mostly agricultural and fishing, agricultural and foraging, especially in the hills, have been our way of life, have been our source of livelihood, income. So therefore, in terms of money, there is very little. We are mostly a debt economy. We just borrow money, mostly among communities. We're mostly under debt because, again, like I said, there are no jobs, there are no economic opportunities like that so much. So the way of living is sort of codependent in that sense. However, in the last few decades, post-liberalization in the country, there have been a sort of attempt to sort of start private, startups. So what we have witnessed in Bangalore or Delhi NCR or Mumbai, we have had a little bit of that ripple effect in smaller states where people are trying to establish like something called a company, something called a startup. We have had that, especially in the year between 2006-7 to 2016-17. So about a decade, about 10 years, we were really sort of working towards a more economically, stable, rich state. And this was just when we got out of decades of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, sort of a very hostile, armed conflict, like decades. So we were just getting out of that. If I remember correctly, in the late 2000, the State Assembly was burned down, So our journey towards economic independence, our journey towards better economic opportunity, better governance was also unfortunately shaped, rooted, or marked by burning down the assembly because people and young people were extremely frustrated and hopeless with the government. So we thought there was a fresh start. So 10 years, we built small companies, we built businesses, we built civil society organizations, the arts movement were thriving, were really flourishing for 10 years at least. And we thought that was going to be our lives. And today, it's just sort of cut, chop overnight. So personally speaking also, I'm really sort of in a moment in history, in time, in life where that promise, was killed overnight. So I think I would have been able to answer your question in 2020 better and not in 2025. And really sorry for that. You talk about escaping or going out, right? Because in 2020, I would have been able to articulate what does moving out or escape mean, because it was more logical, it was more of a choice. Today, it's not. Today, people are moving out, escaping just to survive. Yeah, right, so.
Listening to your experiences as a person, like from an external view who hasn't been through anything similar at all, I'm just trying to empathize here. And when I listen to these experiences, the kind of trauma you've had to experience and the intense daily changing situations and the hopelessness, the intense hopelessness that you talk to, right? So when I think about going through these things, I am very interested in, with this growing hopelessness, what is something that keeps you going, going to different places, talking about these things, connecting with communities, helping in whatever way we can, right? And, even being here, talking to us all about this. How do you do it? Just,
I think there's no other way, first of all. Number two, community work, community building has been really a driving force in my life. I'm passionate about it and I believe in it. Number three, yes. Even if there was a peaceful context, in history and in life, I think I would still do it. I would still connect with people. I would have done slightly different work, of course, slightly different work, filled with more joy, fun, yeah, but this one is a little more intense and, so I would have still done it.
This might sound like a very innocent, honestly naive question, but what can we do to help?
Wow, thank you. Well, we can just talk. Yeah, that's great to start from. Yeah, thank you.
Aku's music and his work is very powerful. Even if someone enters it without understanding the challenges of living in conflict, you can resonate with a lot of the kind of music he creates and the work he does, the poetry, etc. My question to you is, when you see intergenerational conflict, when you live through it and you're talking about it at different forums to different audiences, etc., do you feel the burden of carrying the community's thoughts forward? Or do you feel like, if I have to say something, I have to be politically correct, or I have to think about the audience, what are the thoughts? Because we see this even when we worked with a group that came from Palestine, the theatre group that came from there in Bangalore. We saw a lot of, the fear, hesitance, but also the eagerness to share things. So what goes through your mind? I'm curious to understand that.
Thank you. I mean, yeah. Aku is a close friend. Just wanted to let you know that. It's a small place. So most artists and activists are likely to know each other. And in some cases, they might not like each other, of course. But yeah, Aku and I like each other. So having said that, I'm also aware of the work that Aku co-created with the foundation. While the kind of work that Aku or the Imphal Talkies does is very mainstream today, quite well known, popular, well received as well, I was also thinking about how much of, let's say, your foundation is open to queer, trans, performative arts, because there's a lot out there. They don't have the social capital that Aku has, but nevertheless they have equally or more rich work. So I just wanted to, let you know that, if we could talk about it later on. Number two, the burden of the community, the burden of the voices of the community, the struggles of the community, yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, everywhere I go on my own, but I also go with my people and my community, yes. But I think that burden nowhere comes close to my own burden to live a life like that. To have a life which is constantly in danger, to have a life which is really uncertain, to have a life that I know for sure is not going to be fulfilling enough. I think that burden is way more than the burden of the people. Yeah.
You mentioned that you are visiting Bangalore for the first time. So I'd say you're in the right place. It's a very welcoming place. See, for people who've been born and brought up here in this part of the country, the things that you've given us a sneak peek today is all alien. The only thing that I could relate to, probably, and which we are not offended to also, I'll give you the reason for that as well, is we being Madrasi, labeled as Madrasi when we go to Delhi or somewhere. That's the only thing. When I say you being labeled as a Chinese, we are being labeled as Madrasi. But even that sense, we always feel belong, that the other party who addresses us, there's no distinction between not being felt as a very Indian. But I see that that's difference. Cultural diversity is very much a part of India. It's the very core essence of our country. But what's that one thing which, keeps it so far, this part of the country? Why is there a distance? Why is it so different? Because we are culturally, every part of India is very different. And this happens. What is, according to you, could be that what reason which we feel totally alienated as not being a part of the same country at all?
I think it's a bunch of reasons put together. It's a mix, wherein I think we are really a minority in terms of number of population. Linguistically, too distinct, linguistically as well. Geographically very disconnected. Like the flight services are not still available in some areas out there. There is also, I think, a little bit of imposition or sort of assumption or othering, othering that, so I'm not othered as somebody else, I'm othered as Chinese. There is that. So China being the reference point, Chinese being the reference point, like it happened in the UK way back in history. So it's, I think, probably coming from a certain circle, like who have had that encounter with Chinese people or Chinese food or culture, right? So I think that sort of really unintentional probably, but also very blatant, like reference, and it's sort of passed down, and that's how I think racial stereotypes are built also, without any accurate history to sort of back up that position or understanding. So I think it's a mix of that. And also on my part or on our part, I think we feel safer in our own community often, so we stick together around. So I think the ghettoization and the compartmentalization continue to happen. So I think the linguistic, the racial features, the food, the culture, and also the Chinese reference, I think those are, I think, the reasons why it's marked out to be so different. And also, I think we also come from a region or a society which have undergone systematic violence and oppression for years, and I don't think we still have the right language or freedom of speech, to talk about it in a way that we don't feel we are different. So I'm thinking, like, I would also like to throw in the audience that when we speak about the Maoists, for example, and right now there is surprisingly a peace dialogue being speculated, with the Maoists and the government, which is, I don't know, very surprising. It's right now out there. So I'm thinking that people who come from Kashmir, for example, people who come from northeastern states or parts of Maoist areas, be it in Chhattisgarh or elsewhere, I'm thinking if there is a sort of loosely connected relationship with how the rest of the country, be it Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi, especially in the last 75 years at least, after independence, we have not gone through that, violence of a certain kind, like close to genocide. But these places having continued to live with that, is that a strong marker, that we still don't acknowledge enough, but that's a strong marker why we still are also different. I don't know, that's just a wild guess. Yeah, but that is the kind of affinity that when in a conference room, and it just happened in Delhi recently, I was with the Kashmir group, we were at the Manipur group, there were a couple of people from Assam, there were a few frogs from Chhattisgarh. The moment we sat together, it didn't feel so different. So maybe it's shared experiences as well.
So I want to say this, that, you have barriers. Then as women, you have barriers. Then as a queer person, possibly there are more barriers. So when you look at the lens of conflict, how do you think, or how do you want to reimagine, if you could, what would be that one or two things you would think differently?
I was quickly getting, I think I got your answer finally, after I spoke. It's all there, it just takes time to get out. Also, I'll come back to you. So I think my answer to you is one thing that really sort of stands out in comparison to other forms of, let's say, racial profiling or sort of, different markers, is that with us, what has happened is there's a deep-rooted mistrust, fear, and violence rooted in our memories and in our lived experiences. So the racial, linguistic, cultural food differences is just the surface level differences. We end up liking each other's food, right, at the end of the day. We end up appreciating for how we look also at the end of the day. But what is deeply rooted is that we grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, and even before that, the generation before us who grew up in that era until 2010, let's say, we grew up fearing the armed forces. We grew up looking at them as potential sexual, perpetrators, if I can quote this word, as rapists, We grew up like that, and they are what they are. And what I'm trying to say is, it's a systemic violence and oppression that is so deep-rooted that the relationship is forever scarred there. And what can be undone cannot just come from us, it has to come from the system. So if I'm also now answering your question, the answer cannot be just from us. I mean, we are decent people. We have tried so hard to be there for each other. I mean, we are willing to try, right? The answer has to be more systematic also. From the system, I think the system's accountability is completely missing in this country, especially when it happens in the corner of the country, which can be completely shielded off from public's, eye view, or from the stakeholders' eye view. And whatever media reports that we are going to see here, the media can be very, very, programmed or, fabricated, right? If you were to enter Manipur today, you have to have an ILP, inner line permit system permission from the airport. If you're a foreigner, you need a even more intense process to go in there. So think about it. In your own country, you need, 2 layers of permission to get into often, and that kind of distress is so deeply embedded that when I come to a city like Delhi or Bangalore, I am not interacting with you as who I am, but I'm interacting you on the basis of those experiences. And there's unfortunately a lot of distress, and possibly that's why beyond linguistic difference, the reason we also stick together amongst ourselves is probably from there. And there's a lot of work to do, especially from the system, especially from mental health, psychosocial support systems. There's a lot of work to do, and it's not just our responsibility. We have done enough.
I think at a very fundamental level, it's extremely unfair to say, what can you do? I mean, you've been the victims of all of this. It's the same answer that the colonial powers have given to the Commonwealth for the last 50 years. Right. So it's the same thing going down in scale. So I don't think the question should be at all about what you can do and what you're doing right or wrong. It should be that the shoe should be completely on the other side.
What can we
do? Or what? Anyway, we know what we should not have done for the last 50 or 500 years, but at least in the future, what can we do is what should be the thing. But very quickly, I was interested when I was reading your profile on how you picked on this extremely provocative or even offensive, the Chinky Homo project. How many people got offended by that?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. It was a project that I was part of. I co-founded in 2018. I stayed with it till 2024. I move on from there in 2025. I have other priorities now. My politics have evolved, and there are other people to look after that. So, yeah, very happy to move on from there. But it did say something, about queer, trans, Northeastern, lived reality and politics. It did do quite a lot in Delhi, but it did have its presence in Chennai and Bangalore and Kolkata and Guwahati. Yeah, I mean, it started off when I was very young, but yeah, so we're passing it on to younger people. How many did we offend? We still don't know. The intention was to sort of strike a sort of attention, not particularly to offend or defend anything, but to just leverage on, everyday assumptions, everyday assumptions, casual assumptions, which might be, which might come from deep-rooted biases. So I think we were just sort of striking at people's consciousness or subconsciousness, and everyday casualness.
So I was just hoping that you would speak a little bit more about it, but also to understand now that you have moved on, what is your vision even with the next group which is going to take it up, and is there any sort of a connection where you see that it's going to be driven in a particular direction?
For me personally, the idea of moving on is to move on in a way that I don't control or decide or influence any of it. It's really, really up to them. Times have changed. So yeah, I think it's really up to them, I think.
We've seen a few images that you've been sharing in terms of what the community gets together and does in terms of restoring or realigning or reimagining a sense of livelihood or normalcy, so to speak, within this context. But if you could also throw some more light on what the community brings from their end in order to reimagine this sense of normalcy. And of course, the work that Matai does in turn. So if you could speak a little bit more on what the community and what the people bring with them.
First of all, I want to say that the community we work with are diverse. There are women, there are queer, there are trans folks, there's also IDP. So first of all, the community is diverse. So they bring different things on the table for sure, but I'm trying to think of something shared or common, in what the community bring on the table. There's a lot of hope I think they bring. I'm talking about community where the kind of marginality, economically, socially, politically, there's very little. There's nothing really out there. especially if we look from a very modern perspective, I mean, otherwise it could have been a rich indigenous living, right? But then I think we have also been successful in destroying that, right? The system has been successful in destroying indigenous independence or sustenance or sustainability. Now that we have destroyed, they are very dependent on either the government or the efforts of communities or NGOs or schemes, so to say, in India, or their own efforts, individual entrepreneurship or efforts. So therefore they come from a very marginalized background, and what they really bring on the table is just hope, honestly, that they're willing to try a little more. And that I think I learned from them. I didn't learn it from myself. I mean, I did have the privilege of getting a good education. So my marginality stands nowhere close to theirs. So having acknowledged my privilege, I think their marginality and their community efforts really is the hope and driving force of the work that we do. And herein, I'm not trying to exoticize or paint a picture of, let's say, the poor, marginalized population with resilience. No, I mean, I'm also one of them. Just happen to be educated in a different way that today I could also stand out in a space like this. But it's really, really the hope that they bring on the table and the courage.
I just had a question relating to mental health, because it's a space of trauma and each individual will be having that difficult journey of trying to figure out how to navigate this in the sanest possible way. And when it comes to youngsters, what has been your observation that, in this period of trauma, do they engage more with online media and connections in the virtual world? Or does it sort of create an opportunity for offline real world discussions to increase? And the second thing is, what are the one or two mental health interventions you think that have really made a difference in this period?
First of all, whether offline or online, we have internet ban for most parts of the year. So online engagement and networking is going to be very challenging because there's internet ban on and off. The longest one we had was about 6 months. Number two, offline gathering or mobilization is also very difficult because there is constant surveillance that like more than 10 people or more than 6 people cannot congregate, or there is a constant fear of like an unannounced or unpredicted strike or curfew or breakout. So online and offline mobilization, congregation is constantly challenged, constantly disturbed. So therefore, there's very little that I can also sort of, let's say, paint a picture of what it looks like. I would say that it's very haphazard, it's very on the go, you don't know when it's going to shut down. So that's like it. So therefore, the mental health or the psychosocial lived reality, it gets even more heightened, even more triggering. So one thing that we learned from COVID was that peer support is extremely helpful. So we did something during COVID with a group called the Collective Trust. It's a group of mental health professionals based in Imphal. We ran a helpline back then. I mean, they mostly ran. We happened to be part of it. It proved successful. During COVID, there were a lot of phone calls. There's a joke that the Telemanas, in fact, took some inspiration from that. So Telemanas today is a nationwide online, mental health, psychosocial support, intervention work. I don't know how successful that is for sure. I mean, we have no data to, sort of prove that. However, there is Telemanas. So likewise, we started way back in 2019-20. So we sort of built on that. And today, from 2023, we have been running helplines, peer support, also specialized mental health counseling as well. So we have both. Another is we also have listening circles. We also have listening circles, either online or offline. What we do at listening circle is usually like it's 10 of us or 12 of us, and there is a peer support, peer support counselor, or there is a mental health professional. So they just facilitate a space where you can just freely speak without judgment. And why? Because that's exactly what we don't get in our lives, right? There is no freedom of speech. So we facilitate listening circle, both online and offline. We also do the helpline. We are just about to start a suicide prevention helpline, because we also realize that suicide attempt rate has been always high, but it sort of spiked a lot more in the past 2 years. We have evidence to support that. In the last 6 months, we have had 4 suicide attempts in the relief camps that we work, and 3 of them succumbed to death. So 3 suicide deaths were too big a number for us to not already start a suicide prevention helpline. We are starting it, and we therefore also like to visualize the work that we do so much. Not to say that we have done this or that, but to remind the system, to remind the stakeholders that these are also initiatives that you should take up. You should have taken up already, but not yet, but it's never too late, right? So that's some of the initiatives that we do. We also do community-based research. There is indeed a book that Joshua is carrying. So we also do research because we also like research to back up what we do. So we do all of this.
So there's a border created within yourself. There's a border, the system-based border, and there's a border that we perceive, right? Not just Manipur, maybe entire South versus Northeast, maybe. Right. So how do you break these borders? Because if I think, if you break this border, there's a lot of change that's going to happen. Because I myself, right, in a very small capacity, have been trying to team up with the Northeast, and I've been to several places there and tried to offer employment and stuff like that. But it's not gone well. I've spent a lot of time, from about 2 years, I've been spending some time there. So how do you thin these borders?
I mean, to be able to ask that question, I think itself is the process of breaking that barrier. Even if I don't have a good answer, I think the fact that you're able to raise that question, I think we've already broken some barriers. Having said that, on personal levels, we continue to try and talk to people. But that's at very personal or community level. But I keep saying this, that NCERT or CBSE should just revamp their syllabus. That's it. It's simple. They should just revamp the syllabus and teach them what India is. That's what I've been thinking since I was in university, for at least 15 years now. So they should just revamp the syllabus because none of us read about each other. I don't know a single word of the language here. How unfortunate. So none of us learn about each other, and it's not just about Manipur. I mean, generally speaking, they should just revamp the syllabus. I think the current government is revamping the syllabus in their own way, of course. I mean, I put this in the outline as well, that there are spaces, this is one of those for sure. There are also online spaces. We are heading to 2 more, community spaces later on. So the spaces, network circles do exist, in their own capacities and ways, often also in silos maybe, or isolation. Like young people are there, older folks are there, like women groups are there, queer folks are there. So I think spaces also have their own sort of structure and, population groups. It would be, I think, really helpful to have cross conversations maybe, to have panels which are more diverse, to have conclaves which are more diverse. I think these are helpful, but I would still push my point saying that the government should just revamp the syllabus seriously, with consultation, with experts from different regions, not just in closed door conference and workshop. They should just revamp it as it should be. I'm sure some of us do write for media, I'm sure. Some of us probably are art practitioners. Some of us could be, activists, writers. We can just talk more, I think. And the more we talk, I'm sure it will spill over. What we talk here, I'm sure it will spill over through somebody's social media account, or if any media is here, I'm sure they're lucky enough to be able to feature this. We could think of spillovers or strategic, let's say campaigns or publications. Even the spillovers work quite well. I mean, if 5 of us go back being convinced that, okay, this is great, and we might just spill over in our own networks and circles, and we might be encouraged enough to have another bigger, sitting and talk like this, where I think I would be happy enough to drop by and participate. Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully answer your question, but I guess there is really also not a clear answer to all of this. So as I was saying, that we all come from different walks of life and different experience from the city or the country. If there is anyone out here, like my friends or people I just got to see today, if there's anything that you would like to share with me, share with us, I mean, with permission from the organizer, would really, really love to hear from you as well. Great. Ruth is a great friend. We were in Delhi together.
So being on the other side, being in Mizoram, we have a lot of our kins in Manipur because we also share a border. It's been raw, but I think finding hope through queer people, other queer people like Kumam, who helped me through Delhi. Usually older people don't realize that they have so much impact in our lives. And yeah, I'm still in the process of coming into terms with how things are. Because I have lost some friends during this process, and that loss is really deeply felt. And I hope we can come together again. And yeah, I think from our side, I feel like the government is trying what it can, as imperfect as it is. Yeah, but there's also a concerning trend that I've been seeing where people who are refugees from Myanmar are starting to be otherized. So yeah, there's a lot of fear in me, but yeah, I'm hoping for the best. And yeah, we find hope within each other, and there is hope for the world because we exist, is my point.
As he said, I have been in Bangalore for nearly 15 years now. And the reason why I took the step to go out of Manipur, I am from Imphal, I am from the capital. Having said that, early 90s and late 90s, it started from the 80s. I'm a 90s kid. It started from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s had been very tough. And the reason why I decided to come to Bangalore was to escape Manipur and the kind of problems due to the insurgency and due to the negligence by the government. It was not really a safe place for me to continue my education and for my mental health as well. So I thought that I would escape Manipur and be in Bangalore. And as you said, once you're away from home, you feel the importance of your homeland and the kind of, even though the environment and the situation was very tough, you have that affinity and you have that love for your motherland. You always want to go back, but things prevent me from going back because I've already escaped. And things were getting better with time. And I mean, with Manipur having nightlife, and just before the violence, just imagine Miss India finale being conducted in Imphal. That was like a different ball game because Bollywood is banned in Manipur. It still is, but having such a large scale entertainment program been conducted in Manipur without any sort of problem, it was like a change that I was looking forward to. Cut to a few months later, on May 3rd, I get to see all these clips on Facebook and all this Instagram live, Twitter being exploded with all this hatred. And I was really worried because my brother is also a police officer, and coming from that kind of family, it was very difficult for me to be away from home and be disconnected because after a while, internet got banned. And for me, I would want to mention one thing here. David has been there throughout the violence, I guess, and I was just being a mere spectator through news channels and through phone calls that I have with family. And I could really sense the difference when I visited Manipur very recently. And last time I visited Manipur was before the violence began in May. And I visited very recently. I could see the stark difference, the kind of eerie environment, because you know what, for them, they got used to it. And even though I belong to Manipur, even though I'm from Manipur, it was a very different feeling and I felt like an outsider. The reason being, everything's changed. Everything's changed. The way community gets together, and the kind of words will not be able to help me describe what I felt, but That's how it is in Manipur. And yes, people do say that it's hopeless for the two communities to come together because of the divide that has already been taken place. But I feel that there's some hope, because you know what, when I am in Bangalore and when I meet some cookie friends, we don't have any hatred, rather we greet each other. It may not be the case there because there is what do you call buffer zones being put up, and it's all I'm not so sure how much the government is trying to ensure. When I say government, even the central government as well, how much the central government is trying to diffuse the violence, I am not so sure. I'm talking from a layman perspective, but I think it is possible only when you feel that we are also one of you guys, because we were discussing, because a lot of I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit of time, because when people were discussing, a lot of thoughts came into my mind, because people asked, why do you feel different? Because I felt different because I was neglected. The negligence from the system, from the central government as well, and it became more evident and clear during this violence. It has been for many months now, and the prime minister not even visiting the state. It itself shows that we are being neglected. That kind of hostility is there. That kind of feeling of negligence is there. That's the reason why. That's one of the reasons why we could not, connect to India as an Indian. Even though I'm an Indian, I could not connect to India as an Indian, and I have been living in Bangalore for so long. Bangalore has been beautiful. I'm talking about India as a whole, right? And I feel that the region is neglected, and it's high time, people. When I say people, the people in power, think about it very seriously, and take the right steps so that. I mean, it has been very difficult, and I think it's very doable as well, and that's what I have in mind. And as I said, yeah, there are many things going on in my mind. I'm not able to articulate it well, but having said that, I could see the difference how Manipur was and what Manipur is currently, and people like David and the organizations like David runs. Those are the people who instilled that little hope. Thank you.
Of course, our professional engagement or discussion started about a year ago, like I said, but I don't think I ever dreamed that I would have so many friends from Manipur, including Urmila and Sophia here. I think one thing I'd like to say is that one goes through a process from the other side also, where we're constantly questioning if we're saying the right thing, if we're doing the right thing, or saying anything unknowingly or subconsciously that may trigger pain. And I think I went through that process in the beginning. But eventually, I think, especially with Urmila, it just felt like, what would two people, like what we did earlier today, two people who wouldn't know each other, talk about something that they can connect with. I think it was a start point for me, at least, to be able to connect with Urmila about stuff that was just like, we would rant together. I think I also missed that. That we would just sit and rant for hours about things like a teenager. And there are so many things that we can start to use as connecting points, I think, which we miss. And we kind of think about the larger picture and worry. And then we don't even take that first step with that fear from the other side, I think. So I feel like that process really helped me. And today I just feel like, these guys are family members as well. We miss being around with them. So I think that bond is there now. And then the easing in, I think, is a process which all of us have to step forward and take from our end as well. That's the only thing I can share. But yeah.
I mean, everything, the work, whatever is happening in Manipur, everything is very inspiring. But what I'm feeling called to say today is like when the two of us were discussing on what is freedom, or it's just that feeling of safety, which I think is not there on so many levels. And it's not about what you can do, what I can do. I think the way forward is only what we can do together. And every one of us, it's not to it's not to put down or dismiss that there's so much marginalization happening in the country today. At the same time, I think if we can just, on every level, all of us are marginal. We've gone through it in different levels, but to know that that exists for all of us, and we take that strength from there to go forward together, because that's, at the end of the day, I think all of us here are because we are all connected in a way that we are connected. I don't know, just feeling called to say that.
So thank you for sharing a whole life's worth of information with us. And we have a little something to give you as a token of our gratitude for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I hope to be here again.